being in a room full of men selling a pregnancy products, kind of just like women say like, oh, it's so hard to fundraise. It isn't that much harder to sell it.
Fundraising, you're selling a promise.
Yeah.
Exiting, you're selling on past performance. And like could be yes, but you're really selling on the numbers that exist there today.
She just sold her company. She sat in a room full of men negotiating the biggest deal of her lifetime. Wait, she sold for how much? I can't even believe she managed to get double her valuation. Let's keep this just between us.
Welcome, Nathalie, to the show.
Thank you, Carrie. It's so great to be here with you.
I'm so happy to be here with you. And I was so inspired by your talk at Entreprenistas. We both spoke at that conference, which I thought, by the way, was a magical conference. Just side note.
It was
magical. And the reason that I was so inspired by your talk was that you just so candidly addressed what so many of us feel when building companies, which is really the mental health, the toll it takes on our mental health. And I really want to just honor and appreciate you for bringing that to light on a main stage. It was very powerful.
Thank you, Carrie. I so appreciate that. I mean, I have relationships with lots of founders. That's how I got through raising, growing the business, and selling it. The conversations I was having with founders made me realize, like, a lot of people are in a lot worse place off than I am, but no one's really talking about it. And I think that I'm one who doesn't mind broaching difficult conversations. And I mean, my company, Expectful, was rooted in the belief that talking about the challenges that you have, and for Expectful, it was like in pregnancy and fertility and postpartum, if you can have a dialogue, you can normalize what people are going through. And so that was just my hope of my conversation around mental health with founders at the Entreprenista conference.
It really was beautiful, and I appreciate you sharing it. And speaking of Expectful, let's talk about it. So let's have the start. Tell me about how this got started.
Yeah, so this is like a really interesting way to become a co-founder CEO. So I did not start Expectful. Expectful was started by a fantastic human being named Mark Krasner. And he really believes in meditation and the power of mindfulness. And he had a thought that meditating in pregnancy could have profound outcomes for babies and families. And so he began building this platform, first on Teachable, with just like meditations that were geared for pregnancy. And then he had a really positive response, which led him to create Expectful, the app, or the early iterations of the app. And so I came to Expectful as an advisor. And within like my first couple of weeks, I really helped the company. I helped sign a big deal with Johnson & Johnson. And Mark, is an incredible human. And I think sometimes it's really hard to realize, like, as a founder, that maybe you're not like the best person to take something to continue moving forward with it. And so he wanted to bring me on to take over the reins. And so in September of 2020, I came on as a late stage co-founder and CEO.
And I know you had this very successful career before coming to Expectful. So you make this jump and you go to this basically concept at this point, right? You got some good traction. And here you go. You're coming on as co-founder. What led to you actually taking the jump? Was it the belief in him, the belief in the product, all of it? You had this big career.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, like, you would make it seem like it was a tough call, and it was in a sense. Like, I was trading a lot. Like, I was trading stability and trading a high income for something that was very uncertain. And if I tell you like what made me do it, it was really like something in my stomach, like a belief that I had that I couldn't sleep at night so it was interesting because at the time it was 2020 and the COVID, but also I was at Airbnb at the time, which had just undergone massive changes. And I decided naturally it was time for me to leave. So I'd been doing an interview process, and I I had offers from every single FANG company to be like a senior PM, and which is a role that I had always wanted. And then I had this role that was like, couldn't, really compete on a lot of things. But when I thought about what I wanted to do, like what kept me up at night was like this job. And I think the job with Expectful was the ability to build something on my own. And so, I mean, that's totally irrational, but it was just listening to that gut feeling. And ultimately what helped me feel comfortable about it was like, if I failed, the worst thing that would happen to me probably would be that I ended up exactly where I am today, or where I was back then in 2020, which really was not a bad place at all. Like, I was very happy in the place that I was in, but I knew I'd be disappointed in myself if I didn't try for something else.
Okay, so you decide you're going to try, you're listening to your gut, you say, let's go for this. And then in your first 90 days, you close this round of seed funding, right? So talk to me about how you did that, how you did it so quickly, and what your approach was coming in those first 90 days. I know sometimes in a job, I think it's different as a co-founder in a job. I come in first 90 days, I want to like absorb and learn and maybe have.
Oh, that doesn't work. Yeah.
It does not work in a startup. So talk to me about what went on here in the first 90 days.
Yeah. So, I was trying to take a little bit of a break because at the time I had 7-month-old. So like I was leaving one job and like still didn't have the childcare that I needed. It was a little tough. So I was trying to take a break. That didn't really happen as much as I would have liked. But we were part of an incubator at the time, Founders Factory New York, and our time was expiring with Founders Factory. But one of the things that they promised was fundraising support. And so like I moved up my start date a little bit so that I could work with their team of like how to fundraise. And I'd say I never fundraised before, although I've spent my career like biz dev, product partnerships. I've closed hundreds of deals. Like I've never been in direct sales, but I don't mind. I think selling and relationships is a skill set I find. Like I was really coachable and eager to learn like how you fundraise. And I think it's very much so like it is a process. And if you follow the process and you have good enough metrics, I do believe most people can successfully close a round of funding. I mean, it depends on your market and the timing. Like we're in a pretty tough timing right now, but yeah, like I went to work of like, what is my narrative? What is my story here? And really what's the vision? I was fortunate that we had a lot of great numbers to back up what I was talking about. And yeah, so like got to work building like pitch deck. And then I think going out to investors, like it is a science. Like we had our Notion boards, and like here's who we're going to go after in round one. We had different tranches of investors to go after. Turns out I never needed to even go to tranche 2 or tranche 3, but there was just like a very systematized way of doing the fundraising. And I found it to be easy. Like, in fact, I've now in my past or since then, I've now like coached like dozens of founders on raising their pre-seed, seed rounds, and I think it's something we can all learn.
Wow, that's really interesting and really fascinating. I love this. I hope you teach lots of people how to fundraise. It's great. I've always bootstrapped, so like this area for me is always such an interesting area. I'm always fascinated by people who are able to fundraise, even though I think for me also biz dev is a skill. Always with fundraising, I was a little hesitant. And I don't know if it was because I'm either a control freak and like want control of my own stuff, or if it was just because I was simply afraid. It's very interesting. So it's comforting to hear that you approach it with that kind of not only positive, but real like can-do energy. Love that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think everyone should fundraise. Now, that's really my story that I feel like I've learned after, having been in it. But yeah, not everyone should fundraise. I'll leave it at that.
How does Expectful then grow? You take in the seed capital, you start to grow, and this thing turns into a really quick journey. I mean, Nathalie, when I heard that you were from start to finish 28 months till the sale, wow. I mean, first tell me how that happened and tell me the story of that. And then I want to talk about what that does to you sort of mentally, because I think that's, to me, what was so powerful about your story. But tell me the actual experience and the story. How did this happen?
Yeah, so it's like I came on board, and if you need to fundraise for the survival of the company, like that's your number one job. I feel like that's always a CEO's job, is like keep money in the bank and grow the business. So when our round closed around the beginning of January 2021, my job was to get to work at like building this vision that I just presented to all of our investors, and that was really to take Expectful from a meditation platform to a go-to wellness platform. Myself and the team, we did just that. Like we built a really powerful video platform that we put on top of our audio. So we had thousands of meditations. We had people coming in to teach prenatal yoga classes and how to breastfeed. And like we had mother like circles and different cohorts. And so we really grew the business to meet the needs of women in their fertility through their postpartum journey. And it was beautiful. And I mean, since the moment I came on, like we continued to grow, and all in all, we had over 500,000 users. And I'd say for me, having been in the business, like after a year in the business of all of 2021, we were growing, but we weren't growing at venture rates. So like from our investors, I would hear like, okay, you need to be growing at 30-40% month over month. I think we're probably growing at like 15-18% month over month, which is still healthy, but not necessarily, venture numbers. And, I was thinking, well, like, how do we get to the numbers that we need? And while we did get to the numbers on a revenue perspective, I really started to question whether this business should be on this venture track. And that's for two reasons. So like one, we are a platform for primarily pregnancy and fertility and postpartum and whatnot, but like that journey in life. And what I started to understand in talking to hundreds of users, and I did not understand this when I came in, is that roughly half of the pregnancies in the US are on Medicaid, which to me just like blew my mind. I live in San Francisco, California. Like that is not something I see. A lot of this is in like Mississippi or in the South. But when I started talking to a lot of users who would use Expectful they would download our free trial, which was like $5.99, $6.99 a month. And I would talk to them and I'd see that they used Expectful 5 or 6 times during that weekly free trial period. I would have these conversations with them, like, it seemed to love this product, but you didn't subscribe. Can you tell me more? And they would say like, look, my mental health is in a terrible place. I have 4 or 5 kids, but this month I'm between buying gas and groceries. And I just can't afford a $5.99 subscription to take care of my mental health, even though I really need to. And when you start hearing that over and over again, I realized like that the market size for what we're trying to do is just, it's too small. It is not venture backable. Like, and I give that warning to a lot of companies in the pregnancy space, because it's not the market size that you think, especially when half of people like can't afford basic needs. So yeah.
I think it's important for people to understand that when you are venture backed versus like, you take in friends and family or angels, when you're venture backed, they're not expecting you to just deliver like a nice return.
No,
they want you to 100x. They want they want, that's what they're looking for. It's so crazy to me. Like I hear you say the market is small, and it is small for venture. But like in the real world, it's like, of course you could build a healthy business for, expectant mothers who could pay $5.99 a month. It just wouldn't be venture level. So I can't imagine when you discover that and you're running this business with the venture backing, that must have been where the toll on your mental health really got rough.
Yeah, I think it did, because it's like, we actually probably could have faked it for a while, just in terms of the growth numbers. But I think like another big thing that happened was you had the iOS privacy changes in 2021, which just changed so many businesses of being able to acquire customers. And so like, we did have the growth until then, and then it's just like the changes that Apple and Facebook made it challenging for smaller businesses to grow. So I wanted to add that too. But I mean, yeah, I think having that realization that with a small market and now the whole entire customer acquisition landscape has changed. It's like, what do you do? And, I laid out what are all the possibilities ahead of us. And like one possibility is you go down the healthcare route, you go down the B2B buyer route, which like honestly, and personally, like I no offense to anyone that's in it, that doesn't excite me. Um, it's like a really long road, and not very exciting, in my opinion, the sales cycles. And also it was a really unknown road. Like, in order to do that, I'd have to raise millions to just explore that route.
The amount of time it would take.
Yeah, the amount of time it would take.
Yeah, I get it. You raise venture, you have this discovery, you're like, we need a good exit relatively quickly because you don't want to keep raising if you know that it's not.
No, you don't. And I had some really fantastic mentors like that and investors. And I mean, I thought, okay, well, if I pivot here, like maybe I can get us to $10 million in like in annual revenue 2 years from now. And when I told that to them, they're like, you just need to stop. Like, you should get out of the business because, like, this is a bad waste of your time. And it's like a bad waste of our time. Like, they have a lot of time and it's less impactful for them because they invest in hundreds of businesses. But for me, my time is the most valuable thing. And I wasn't like knowing that I wasn't going to ever get the return that would excite them.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If you hadn't raised venture, if you had sort of halfway bootstrapped, it's funny, like we got to it a little early there. Like if you hadn't raised it, do you think that you could have built like small to mid-sized business that would have been successful and maybe a little bit less pressure?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I didn't build initial Expectful, so it's but let's say I had, and if I had done it with a bootstrapping mentality in mind, and I would have had to make very different decisions, like in terms of hiring and the team and the level of growth. I think, we could have still had it and would make healthy revenue. Like we always had healthy revenue and like in the good margins. I mean, it's an app business, so super healthy margins. And it's like you got an exit that is life-changing for the people that are on board, but it's not venture. It's not exciting for venture.
So you decided you could have gone with like healthcare that not only didn't excite you, but you'd have to raise more money. So how did you find the path to go to Babylist?
Yeah, so it's like there were a couple of paths I looked at. I looked at the healthcare angle of like, here we pivot and we keep going. I even looked at the one like where we try to buy back assets and run the company. I mean, I think like at that point it just wasn't that exciting to me of doing that. I mean, I think if you because if you found the company and like maybe you feel differently about it, and it's not that like I didn't love it, but it wasn't really what I wanted to continue pouring my time into. After it was a really accelerated 8 months. But then it's like, I thought Expectful, what we had some pretty amazing things, like 500,000 users in the pregnancy space. We have healthy revenues from our app. But I'd say like what's amazing is we also have a really low CAC and conversion funnel. So we had like best in class 4x conversion funnel, which is like a testament to how great our product really was in serving the needs. So of like the people that would download, and I don't remember the exact metrics, but like we had a high chance of converting them to paid. And what I saw in that was like, okay, there's something really valuable for a larger company that has a high CAC. So like take a fertility company who has an LTV in the thousands, or Babylist, who like sells tons of different products to that one user. And yet like across the board in pregnancy and fertility, customer acquisition is super high. And we have a low CAC, great conversion retention, and built a product that people love. So like this really was like a strategic sale, like for the person that needed us, that needed that help and support. Like Expectful could really be a great asset.
And so did you hire a banker for the process?
Unfortunately, and it's not like on the banker, but like I was like strong armed into hiring a banker, which was, a challenge for me, and it's something I would not recommend to like early stage founders. One is like I've spent my career in biz dev. When I was at Google, I sat on the other side of the M&A deals. So it's like I can negotiate a contract in my sleep. I can do the whole process. And I also can do it really quickly. And so the process of working with a banker takes a lot of time. I'd say they probably added 6 or 7 months to the process, which was like not great. I mean, fortunately, I'm a planner. I am really good with numbers, and like I had planned that into our P&L. And so like it wasn't a problem. But I think we all would like to have 6 or 7 of our months of our life back where you're not negotiating a sale deal, because that's never fun. Right?
No. And so ultimately you get across the finish line with Babyless. Did you end up staying on with them?
Yeah. So I think like one of my requirements in selling was like that I just wanted to stay on for 6 months. It was, I did all of this in 28 months. I had a small child. I was pretty burnt out. Like, and, I just needed to take a break. And so I stayed on for 6 months.
One of the things that you talked so openly about that I was really impressed by was the experience and the toll that it did take on your mental health. And so I would love for you to share some of that insight and how that sort of defined your journey going forward.
I'd say like there's a good 6 or 7 months where it was really tough being in there. I think one of the hardest parts of selling your company, or at least the place that I was in, is like I was all alone. I couldn't tell my team that I was selling the company because they were an integral part of the sale. Like we needed to keep the business up and running and growing. Then you're taking all of these meetings while running the company. So it's like fundraising, which, I think founders typically find it hard to fundraise and then run the business. But it's like, but you still can't tell people what you're doing. And then it's like you have a time pressure. And I'd say what's tough about the sales process, unlike fundraising, I mean, they're somewhat similar in like you're selling yourself. But with fundraising, it's like you need less no's to get to a yes, like a lot less no's. It's getting a yes when you're selling your company is like a really high bar. Yeah. And so the rejection, it's constant rejection, probably like 10 to 1 that you get with fundraising.
Well, when you're fundraising, you're selling a promise.
Yeah.
And exiting, you're selling on past performance. And like it could be yes, but you're really selling on the numbers that exist there today.
Yeah. It's like we had multiple offers, but like, which is great. But it's really like you're putting yourself out there, like, and it is like you are being evaluated. It feels somewhat personal, more so than than fundraising. And so, yeah, the sales process, doing it alone, I think it's really challenging. And I mean, it was also probably the period in my life where I grew the most personally. And as grueling as it was, I'm so grateful for it because I'm just a much, I think, stronger person. Like, and I think to anyone that's going through a sale process, like you need a coach, you need a therapist, you need a whole support team around you to help you get through it. But if you can get through it, I think that the change that you go through as a leader and an entrepreneur, it's pretty tremendous.
How do you think it made you better?
I think it made me better at setting boundaries for one. Like I think one of the things I was struggling with when I was selling my company was just taking care of myself. Because I was taking care of so many people. I was taking care of the company. I was taking care of the investors and taking care of doing the sale. And then I worked with a coach and we were like, well, Natalie, like, what can you really drop? Like, what balls can you just drop completely and like nothing will happen? And we were able to like have a hard look at that. And there were like a lot of things that I could just completely stop doing and nothing changed business, which is like a little sad that I had been spending my
normal. It's normal. That's all of us, right? Like if you just like drop it, what's going to happen?
Yeah, and like nothing bad happened at all. Like we're still remain steady. And so I think it helped me really with prioritizing myself, but like a grit. Like I mean, I've always been gritty my whole life, but having a grit to get through it. Also, you have to deal with a lot of different personalities during the sales process. Like as a woman of color, like you deal with some pretty sharp elbows and like I mean it helped me hone like put my boxing gloves on a bit. Not necessarily with like the actual buyer, but through the process.
Oh, yeah, no, through the process, you're sitting with people who you never ordinarily would be sitting with. It's not even necessarily the buyer, it's all the
Yeah, I know.
bankers. It's that, yeah, and you're sitting there and you're like, I just always describe that feeling for so many of us as like sitting in a room full of men and you're like, what the heck? I mean, it's just the whole experience. You're right about sharpening your elbows. It's like really.
Yeah, and I mean it's like being in a room full of men selling a pregnancy products. Like that's what it's kind of just like,
Wow.
if a lot of women say like, oh, it's so hard to fundraise, like if you're in a women's product in the women's health space or whatnot. And it isn't that much harder to sell it because like, different clientele, like, you're talking about people in parts of the country that like don't care about women's rights. And it's, it wasn't fun.
That's tough. So on the day you closed, so it's done. How did you feel on that day?
How did I feel that day? I mean, I was so anxious actually. Like I think until even though like I knew it was signed, like the deal had been signed a couple days before and it was just sitting in escrow. Until the money hit the bank account, I was just like I was on pins and needles. Like I don't think I did anything. And it happened to come in like very late in the day.
Remember the minute it came in? Because I remember the minute.
Yeah, I remember it was down to the wire. And yeah, but I do remember when it came in and it was just like a sigh of relief that it's like it is done. Even though it's like I had spent because I've had this partnership experience and like the Babyless team was phenomenal. Like we were able to close it really quickly. It just respectively, I can't remember how long it took, but it was like a couple of weeks over Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving holidays were included, and there's a lot of quick iterations because all of us were very accustomed to like biz dev and like contract negotiation. So the whole process of like, even though all of our I's were crossed and our I's were dotted and our T's were crossed and it had been done before, like I knew it was happening. You just can't relax until the money hits your bank.
That's right. And so what did you do once your contract's up with Babyless, you're done? This took a tremendous toll. It's 28 months of your life, like a crazy high pressure cooker situation. What did you do afterwards?
Yeah, so I left in June of 2023, and both my husband, our family, we traveled for a long time. Like we traveled for the entire summer. We spent 12 weeks away, which was frankly far too long. Like, when you're that burnt out collectively as a family, like you probably shouldn't travel for an extended period of time.
A pro tip, actually.
It's a pro tip, but yeah, it was just, it was nice to get out of the day-to-day of like, taking Zoom calls from my living room, which is, where I lived for the past couple of years, especially during the pandemic. And it's just nice, like, have freedom in my calendar. And so I really gave myself, a lot of people advised me to like, they're like, Natalie, take a full year off and don't do anything. And like, well, I don't know if I can do that. But like, I did take a good several months to myself. And then I started consulting with a couple of companies and, working on a couple of business ideas. I tried to buy a company and I failed there. We didn't win the bid. And honestly, I'm still figuring out what comes next. I'm now in a place to like really dive into that after like taking the time to process this, care for myself. And now like I've been able to advise like dozens of founders and to stay relevant and and help them. But I'm excited about what comes next, and I don't know what that is.
I can't wait to see what's next for you. And I love how you answer the question, because we don't always know what's next. We don't always know what's happening in the moment. Like, you took the time to repair and breathe and come to a space and give back to other founders. And that's beautiful. And you'll figure it out. It's awesome. That is awesome stuff. Well, I'm so happy to have you on the show. If people want to get in touch with you or maybe get like any consulting from you, anything like that, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And my name is a non-traditional spelling. It's French. It's Nathalie, Nathalie Walton. And you can find me on LinkedIn.
And you weren't always Nathalie with an H, right? I remember that from a dinner.
No, I wasn't. I mean, I don't know if we have the time, but when I was 4 years old, my parents went to Paris and they brought me, I was born Nathalie without an H, which is just Nathalie. And they brought me back a bracelet with a French spelling of Nathalie. And I said, you know what? I really like this new spelling. You need to change my name. And I was 4, and at 4, my name was legally changed to Nathalie with an H.
And we'll close with that, because you've been clearly charting your own course and your own path ever since you're 4 years old. And it's fabulous. So thank you so much, Nathalie, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation.